Hello AP Euro, it's Mr. Walker, and this is a video reviewing the scientific revolution and enlightenment, if I can fit it on this video. But I'm at least going to start with scientific revolution and enlightenment because keep them together in your understanding. So I'm going to write some notes down on this page. I'm going to write scientific revolution here. Scientific revolution. And then I'm going to write enlightenment here. And they're connected, and if you don't remember why, we'll go over it. These, of course, like any other sort of chapters or ways in which historians put things into different periods, they overlap with each other. Although the scientific revolution sort of comes first, and it's roughly from 1500 through 1800. The Enlightenment is more in the mid to late 1700s, or early to late 1700s. Scientific revolution is really like 1600s, and later is sort of its heyday. These are both intellectual movements. So they're movements of ideas, intellectual movements. Other intellectual movements we've studied, for example, humanism, is that glorification of the human body and mind, and through the study of ancient Roman Greek. And we've looked at Romanticism, which comes afterwards. These are intellectual movements, movements of ideas, or realism, or any of these movements of ideas, nationalism. Okay, so what do the scientific revolution and enlightenment have in common? Well, they both are using observation and logic and reason to make conclusions about the world, to make conclusions about, and by the world, in the scientific revolution, it's about nature. And think of science, whether it's geology or astronomy or chemistry or biology or anatomy, all of these ideas are coming in through the scientific revolution. The Enlightenment, on the other hand, is about society, about the ways that human beings behave, whether that's politics or economics or culture or gender and class. It's all, this is part of the Enlightenment. And so while they both use observation and logic and reason to make conclusions, the scientific revolution is going to be about nature, and the Enlightenment is going to be about society. And okay, let's do the scientific revolution first. So they both end up, because they're using logic and reason and observation, this is posing a challenge. And this challenges the church. It also challenges Greek and Roman thought. Instead of during the humanist times when they're taking Greek and Roman thought and relearning it, this at times will challenge Greek and Roman thought. It's also challenging folk beliefs or beliefs of people, like breaking a mirror is bad luck, or walking under a ladder, those kind of folk beliefs. Or let's say that there are witches who are curdling milk. Folk beliefs and superstitions. And also, it's going to challenge absolutism, the rule of kings. All right, so we'll start with, if you remember those posters we made, we'd have a scientist, or we'd have a philosopher, we'd have the book they wrote, what ideas they had, what it challenged, and what new vision of the universe it gave. And so when you're thinking of scientific revolution and enlightenment, you can come back to this idea. With the scientific revolution, we started by looking at the heliocentric theory. And several scientists over the course of a couple hundred years were proving that our solar system, well, it's a solar system. It revolves around the sun, not against the earth. So this challenges, I'm just going to go like this, challenges the geocentric theory, or an earth-centered universe, geocentric system, which was both promoted by the church and also by Aristotle. the Greek philosopher. Okay? The people who end up challenging the heliocentric theory, the first major thinker was Copernicus, who uses measurements of Tycho Brahe, and also he doesn't publish his findings until after his death, posthumously. Why? Because it's dangerous to actually go against the teachings of the church. Think about what's happening in the 1500s. We've got the Protestant Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, and there's violence, especially with ideas that challenge religion. And so these scientists are doing it largely in secret. And Copernicus fails to, he keeps his information, but he publishes it after his death. And he is from Poland. Fellow scientists over the years continue to promote and prove the heliocentric theory, including Johannes Kepler, who argues for and figures out that rather than being concentric circles that planets move in, that they actually move in ellipses. And I mean, it's not like you're going to have to know all of these, but the big guys to know, at least, are Copernicus and then Galileo. And Galileo, he also challenges the church. And like Luther, they take him to a trial and they force him to recant. Unlike Luther, who refuses to recant, Galileo recants and apologizes and says, sorry, I was wrong, for dare saying that we have a heliocentric universe rather than geocentric system, and he's put in house arrest for the rest of his life. Sort of like what we're dealing with now with coronavirus and house arrest. And Galileo, again, he uses the telescope, and beyond the heliocentric theory, he also sees the shape of the moon, that it is craggy and rocky surface rather than smooth, which is what Aristotle had claimed before. And he also starts doing experiments with force. And so he is a major scientific figure. The next one who eclipses him, to use a moon term, is Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton in Britain. And if you remember, I have the Newton's cradle, which are those little balls that are dangling on those strings that go back and forth. And so his major contribution that we remember is the universal theory of gravity, and as well as about force. For every action is an equal and opposite reaction. And what the big thing with Isaac Newton is, this creates what's called a mechanistic universe. Mechanistic universe, where things that are happening in the earth and in the heavens and the stars can be explained by this universal language of mathematics. Mathematics. Newton also is one of the fathers of optics, of light, and he's a giant in the field. Other scientists who we looked at were Vesalius, who is Dutch, who was dissecting corpses, anatomy. Again, this is also around the same time as Michelangelo, who's doing the same thing, but Vesalius wrote it in a scientific book looking at the structures of human beings. So we have anatomy. Let's see. There was Robert Boyle, and like Boyle's law. And I think of boiling, that has to do with the relationship between pressure and volume and heat. And so this is related to metaphysics and chemistry. And you've also got, let me think, Maria Sibylla Marian. Maria Sibylla Marian, because there are also a few women, even though they were largely, they were excluded from studying science. There were brilliant women such as Maria Sibylla Maryland, who was a naturalist and botanist. And she traveled all the way to Suriname in the New World. And if you remember those incredible paintings that she drew. Another woman, Margaret Cavendish, who was British and was actually invited to the Royal Society of London. Brit scientist. And there are other examples of it. But during this time, you have different royal societies that are created. Some, like in Britain, it's called, where there were, royal societies, where scientists would get together and they would talk about science and share their ideas. And this, they pop up throughout Europe, where there's the Royal Society in England, but there are also ones in Germany, and in France as well. And they end up talking with each other, and there becomes an international community of scientists. So there you go. That's sort of a big overview. Man, there's some other scientists I liked a lot too. There's Anton von Leeuwenhoek, who used the microscope. I mean, there are so many incredible different ideas, but the main big ones, at least, think of challenging the heliocentric or the geocentric system, and then going to Newton and think about anatomy or chemistry. Oh, there was also let's see. Yeah, we'll stick with this for now. Okay, I'm going to make another video that fills in this part about the Enlightenment.